Welcome to the Friday vlog.
Welcome to the Friday vlog.
And today we wanted to talk about honesty in relationships.
We do.
And honesty seems really straightforward. It's like, okay, just be honest, just be truthful. But one of the areas where people can get themselves into trouble, and I'll talk about one of my experiences getting myself into trouble with that, is that sometimes we're not honest with ourselves. Not meaning to not be honest, but we aren't aware that we're not listening to our truth within.
That's absolutely true.
And so the example that came to mind when I was thinking about this topic was related to me going back to work after we had our second daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point in time when we had our second daughter, I was working full-time. And Angus, you were working freelance as a photographer at
I was
that point in
working
time.
less time.
You had a lot of free time in your
That's
freelance. And so how it was set up is I had 3 months maternity leave, and then after that 3 months was finished, if I didn't go back to work, I was going to lose my job. And it just made complete sense to me that because I was the one with the steady income working full time, that I would go back to work after those 3 months, and you would be the primary caretaker of the girls and do your freelance work.
Which didn't work out very well, did it?
And even though on an intellectual level, on a logical level, that made complete sense, internally, every fiber of my being was saying no. It was absolutely not what I wanted to do. But I didn't even talk to you about that because all I could hear was my conditioning telling me that I needed to do it, that it was basically my fear about what would happen to us financially if I didn't go back to work. So that was so loud, it wasn't even a consideration in my mind for me not to go back to work. And I know that years later we talked about it and you happened to mention, like, I never asked you to go back to work. And you were absolutely right. You never asked me to go back to work. I was the one that said that this is what I'm doing. And in going against what I really wanted, it ended up creating a lot of friction in our relationship. Even though you didn't ask me to go back to work, I was feeling very resentful about it. The goodwill in our relationship diminished with the intensity that I was working and then coming home and nursing and pumping milk in a day and all of that. I ended up getting quite ill and was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And then as things kept falling apart, the relationship, the quality in the relationship just got worse and worse. Our conflict increased, and I ended up having feelings for someone else. We ended up splitting up for a little bit, and eventually we did find our way back to each other, which I'm very grateful for. But it was quite a difficult journey.
Yeah, and I think in retrospect, push come to a shove, we would have always figured it out. I would have had to have figured it out, and that might have meant me giving up my career as a photographer, and that's probably what needed to happen at that point. I don't know, maybe not, but I think that we're creative beings, and if we teamed up on that front, we would have come up with some solution. And it would have been far healthier to follow our instincts on that level than to sort of succumb to the fear, which I know that I was doing, and it sounds like you were too. And really, to be honest, I think we kind of deprived ourselves of something that could have potentially been very exciting, that process of reinvention, if we were really to sort of tap into that part of ourselves that is intuitive and look for something that was fresh and new. I'm sure something would have come up.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the learning, was learning to trust that inner knowing, to trust that inclination. I didn't trust it, and so I used my intellect as my compass point rather than using my heart. And if I'd used my heart, it was absolutely loud and clear what was aligned with that love inside of me, that I wanted to be the one that was there at home with our girls, and that felt absolutely right, and going back to work felt absolutely wrong. Now, it might be the complete opposite for somebody else. I'm only speaking about my personal circumstance, and the bigger picture is what I'm talking about is being willing to listen to that deeper knowing inside of ourselves and being honest with ourselves about the feedback from that, And then from there, bringing that honesty into the relationship, which is what I struggled with at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, when I say how we were depriving ourselves potential to sort of be excited by the possibilities, it does sometimes feel like a roll of the dice. But when you're really listening to your heart and following those inclinations, when you do make that roll of the dice and you see the fruits of that, wow, what an incredible experience life can be. And I fully accept and own the fact that I was really running on fear at that point. And I didn't like the situation that I was finding myself in. It was hard to be a parent on those terms. And also, I feel like I was probably not really being very honest in the way where I was accepting that responsibility. There was a part of me feeling like, oh, I can finagle my way out of this. I can find a way to get my career up and running again so that, I don't know, we can maybe have childcare or do something on that front. But the fact is that it was kind of impossible to do that. I can think of all sorts of instances where I'm trying to sort of resurrect my ailing career, where with the kids in tow it was pretty difficult. There was a lot of juggling that I wasn't ready for, and we needed to be a team at that point, and I don't think we really were. And I just think that it's sad in a sense that, had we put our wits together and really kind of were honest and try to figure out things on those terms and followed those inclinations, followed that wisdom, we would have come up with something probably really special and exciting and had a different experience. With the benefit of hindsight, sure, but it's kind of all led us to this point in our lives, which is wonderful. But at that time, we weren't following our true nature in a way where I feel like we were listening to our instincts and following our intuition. And so often people struggle on that level, and I think that's a good part of the nature of the work that we do, is to help people come back into resonance with that part of themselves, which is following their heart and not getting caught up in what's stored away in the hard drive.
And being willing to then bring that into the relationship and letting go of all assumptions and preconceptions about what that means, because I had already decided in my head that it wasn't possible, so what was the point in bringing that forward? And so to have the willingness to bring that forward and then see, like you're saying, what the possibilities are.
Yeah, because there always are possibilities, and it's so easy to sort of get into sort of negative future fantasy and limiting beliefs and all the rest of it. But it's kind of just going into yesterday's news, the fake news of our internal hard drive. Again, fine, we're here today and we're doing this work probably as a result of having had that experience, but that experience could have been altogether different if I feel like, we showed up in a more honest and vulnerable way.
Yeah. And the good news is that there's always opportunities for learning. There's always opportunities for course correction. So even though I do have some regret around that at this point, I'm also really grateful for the learning that came about as a result of that. Even though it was packaged in a painful way, I know that I grew a lot and learned from that to listen more deeply and to pay attention. And so that's what we're encouraging for you, is to really notice, are you listening to your deeper knowing? Are you listening to your wisdom? Are you listening to your common sense? Are you allowing that to be your compass point and being willing to bring that into the world and to voice that when necessary? Or are you caught up in fear? Are you caught up in conditioned habitual thinking that isn't really aligned with your true nature? And again, there's no perfection in this, but there's an opportunity to get better and better and be on that learning curve of learning the difference between the two, and as a result of that, living life more in alignment with your true nature.
Yes, which is living life large.
Expansively.
Expansively.
Yeah. Well, we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Yes, have a wonderful weekend.